How does Formula One's most legendary team get to the point where its two stars, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, launch public bombs against their own engineers? What really happened in Qatar for Ferrari to hit rock bottom and awaken the ghosts that we thought had been overcome? What happened in Lusail was not just a bad weekend, it was a declaration of internal war. The 2025 Qatar Grand Prix was much more than a one-time disaster for Ferrari. It was a symptom of a structural disease that has begun to rot the foundations of the most historic team in Formula One. From the moment the red trucks disembarked in Lusail, the warning signs were evident. There was no clarity in the technical direction. The team arrived without a solid base configuration, with contradictory SF25 data between simulator and track, and with a tense atmosphere in the garage. The track conditions, with brutal abrasiveness and extreme temperatures, were the perfect setting to amplify the defects of a car that had already been showing vulnerabilities since pre-season. Ferrari was not only poorly prepared. I was disoriented. During the first free practice sessions, both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton reported a total lack of stability in the rear axle, thermal degradation that was impossible to manage, and an aerodynamic balance that changed dramatically between medium and fast corners. Engineers found themselves unable to offer concrete answers. Radio conversations, normally structured and collaborative in tone, became chaotic exchanges, riddled with uncertainty. With each adjustment that was proposed, a new problem arose. Frustration began to emerge in the gestures, in the silences, and later on the track. Qualifying for the sprint was a debacle. Hamilton, used to doing magic with difficult cars, couldn't even get past Q1. Eliminated in the first cut with a car that literally wouldn't turn. Throughout the weekend, he had to drastically modify the setup between sessions, even starting from the pit lane in the sprint after a last-minute setup that only made things worse. For his part, Leclerc, who has been the face of the resistance in Maranello for years, barely managed to sneak into Q3 with a lap that bordered on the miraculous. But his SF25 slapped him back. A brutal spin at turn 15, caused by a sudden loss of rear grip, left him with no chance of improving his time. The most alarming thing was not the performance itself. It was the feeling of total disconnection between the drivers and the team. Adjustments that normally correct small deviations had no effect. Each attempted solution opened a new Pandora's box. The car seemed to behave like a living, chaotic entity, changing its character without warning. And in the midst of all this, the two men called upon to restore glory to Ferrari were facing off, not against their rivals, but against their own team. The final result was not just disappointing, it was a humiliation. Leclerc in 10th position, Hamilton in 18th. For a team that had just fought for the Constructors' Championship in 2024, this weekend in Qatar was a violent reminder that the past does not guarantee the present. And if radical decisions are not made, the future could be even bleaker. What came after the disaster on the track was even more shocking. The statements of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were not simple post-race reactions. They were a guided missile to the heart of Ferrari, a public break that has rarely been seen in the modern history of Formula One. Both drivers, each with their own style, broke the silence with a forcefulness that shook the entire paddock. There were no half measures. There was no diplomacy. Only truth, raw and direct. Lewis Hamilton, visibly affected after finishing at the bottom of the table, did not wait to express his disappointment. His words were icy, accurate, and devastating. "How is it possible that we have made the car worse?" he said as he got off the SF25. A phrase that, by itself, encapsulates the feeling of helplessness. But he didn't stop there. Minutes later, in a round of interviews, he launched what is probably the strongest accusation he has made since leaving McLaren more than a decade ago. The engineers are lost. It wasn't an emotional complaint. It was a technical evaluation from a 7-time world champion. A ruling that calls into question not only the decisions of the weekend, but the entire development structure of Maranello. Hamilton made it clear that this was not an isolated mistake, nor bad luck. He talked about an extensive list of notes that he has been accumulating over the previous weekends. Notes that describe patterns of failures, strategic gaps, inconsistencies in the correlation between wind, tunnel, and track, and a culture that never ends up learning from its mistakes. His message was not one of abandonment, but rather a warning. If Ferrari does not wake up, what is coming could be even worse. Charles Leclerc, for his part, was colder, but just as devastating. In front of the microphones, he dropped a phrase that paralyzed his followers. "There is zero performance in this car." And he repeated it with a serenity that could only come from someone exhausted, emotionally drained, who no longer tries to disguise the obvious. He added that he was not optimistic for the race, something completely unusual for him, a driver who even on the worst days tries to find the positive side. This time he didn't. This time, he simply pointed to the void, the technical void, the strategic vacuum, the leadership vacuum. The harshest statement came when he confessed that he was taking a stupid amount of risk on the track, not out of ambition, out of desperation, out of necessity, because the car has no margin. Because if you don't push it past the limit, you can't even be in the conversation. And that, coming from a driver who's already survived difficult single-seaters, is a cry for help that should not go unnoticed. Both pilots converged on an essential point, the total disconnection between the technical team and what they experience inside the cockpit, which translates into wrong setup decisions, incomprehensible strategies, and a car that not only does not evolve, but sometimes, like in Qatar, clearly devolves. But the most alarming thing was not just what they said. It was what they didn't say. The tension that was palpable in their faces, in their body language. Leclerc's lost look after qualifying. Hamilton's broken tone when talking about the future. It's not just frustration about a career. It is the reflection of an emotional fracture within the team. And when your two leading pilots stop believing, everything else collapses in a chain. Ferrari, historically, has experienced extreme ups and downs, but it has rarely faced such a powerful double front of internal attack. Qatar was not just a low point in sports. It was the exact point where the masks fell off, and the drivers decided to stop protecting the team's image and start defending themselves. This is not a simple bad result. It is an unmistakable sign that something very profound is wrong in Maranello. And if we do not act quickly, the damage will not only be technical, it will be moral, and that is much more difficult to repair. Qatar's hell did not end at the checkered flag. It was just the beginning of a silent but devastating earthquake that began to shake Ferrari's foundations from within. What seemed like a weekend to forget has become the epicenter of a possible open war between pilots, engineers, and managers. An internal fracture that, if not controlled, can escalate to irreparable levels. Frédéric Vasseur, team leader, is facing his toughest test since taking charge. It is no longer about managing external expectations. It's about containing an internal fire. The figure of Vasseur, who until now had gained credit for stabilizing the team's culture and reducing strategic errors, is beginning to erode in the face of the perception that Ferrari has lost technical direction. Quietly, they begin to question their key decisions, the insistence on maintaining certain development philosophies, the slowness to adopt aggressive solutions, and the dependence on hierarchical structures that have proven to be inefficient in times of crisis. Meanwhile, the Hamilton-Leclerc duo, instead of uniting to move the team forward, is beginning to show signs of a deep conceptual division. Both are drivers with title ambitions, both are extremely technical and demanding, but they have very different ways of approaching adversity. Leclerc wants immediacy. He asks for solutions now. He demands clear answers. Hamilton, more methodical, presses from within with strategy, building arguments that little by little erode the credibility of those who make technical decisions. This difference in approaches can lead to a silent conflict over control of influence within the team. Added to this is external pressure. The Italian media has already begun to leak rumors about internal conflicts. There's talk of possible departures in the aerodynamics department. Heated discussions after the race are mentioned. It has even been rumored that Hamilton himself has requested a complete overhaul of his accompanying engineering team. If these tensions are not resolved soon, the domino effect will be inevitable. What we experienced in Qatar was not just a bump in the road for Ferrari. It was a deep crack that has exposed internal tensions, structural errors, and an uncertain future. In a season that was supposed to represent the consolidation of a red resurgence, what we saw was the raw exposure of all its weaknesses, amplified by the voices of its own stars. And that is the true dimension of this story. And this is where you come in, because this story is still being written. Because each race that comes can be one more spark in this internal fire, or the beginning of a reconstruction from the ruins. Do you think Leclerc and Hamilton will manage to align their interests for the common good? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a conflict of no return within Ferrari? Who should give in? The pilot? The engineer? The team leader? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.